Are we live? We good? We good? Hello, fellow Crowfallers. So yeah, I'm just going to get right to it. I'm not going to beat around the bush. This is an updated environment, all new textures, assets, and stuff like that, some lighting and kind of effects. And I want to show this off first, and then I'm going to go through a little bit about the process of how we do it. And then, like Todd said, me and Steve, we're actually going to run through with an actual character. So right now, there's not a character in it, but I'm just going to kind of show off a little bit of some of the new look that we're kind of shooting for. Sorry, I was just running really fast through that. I have this set. If I run really fast, it will go like 60 meters a second. So this is kind of, some new trees, some new grass, all new textures. Like I say, they all kind of blend. And I will warp around real quick. So I'm going to run really fast through this so I can kind of get to certain kind of beauty shots to show off. A little bit of a lake, water. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to back out of this. I'm going to kind of show you the process of how we're doing all this now. And so I'm going to close this down real quick. Bear with me. And like Todd said, what's really interesting now is that we're no longer going through just a test level. We're moving over to actually how we're going to do this with the parcel Tetris pizzas. And what's really cool about that is how it can scale. It's almost infinite. You can make them as large or as small the worlds as you want. So we really like that aspect of it. So here's a quick asset. This is an updated asset of the ballista that we are putting in for the next milestone. You can counteract the catapults, those wily catapults. And we're using a program called Substance for this one. And I'm using this for not only just objects, but for the terrain textures. And let me load up a quick example of that. By the way, this is my first time doing this, so please bear with me. All right, let's load this in. What's really cool about this program, Substance Designer, is it really does kind of open the doors up for artists, for environment artists. We're able to really do things that you really couldn't before. And that process is tiling textures was always kind of a pain in the past. And just to quickly give you an example, this is something that I painted up in Photoshop. And so like say this is a rock texture. To tile this thing, you have to go into Photoshop. You kind of have to paint where you think it's going to tile, and there's some techniques, and then you bring it into the program and you see how it looks and how it's going to stretch out basically. It's kind of an arduous process. With Substance, this allows me to create textures in a way that I could never before. And using all the bells and whistles with like speck and gloss, and I'm trying to get too techno-babbly, but so here, I'll show you what I'm talking about. This is a mud texture, an updated one, and I've already put like puddles within the texture, so it's actually going to show up like that in game. But this allows me to tile this out in such a way to check to see where the seams are going to be, and to see kind of how it looks when it's stretched out to a fairly large degree. And that's kind of how I go through this process. And it's really kind of fascinating. And this is, I'll show you another really cool thing that this allows me to do. This is a new like road texture that I was working on. And this program, again, allows me to come in here and change aspects of the texture that I don't have to actually go back in and paint. It really frees up a lot of time.
So I know we have a question. Are you ready for a question?
Oh, God. I think so.
Okay. You need to repeat it just in case they don't hear me. What's been the hardest environment to create or design so far?
Actually, that is a good question. What is the hardest environment to design or create so far? Is that what the question was?
Yes.
That's actually a really good question, because in the past, the way environments would work is you kind of have your limits. You know exactly what you're going to be doing, and I can just create an environment, just this massive environment or small environment. With the process that we've been taking is we've been discovering how we're going to actually do this, which is we want these small parcel-like environments that are stitched together so that we can rotate them and infinitely scale the worlds, or as small as we want them. How do you do something like that? So this was a very challenging process to come up with. So we knew very early on we needed a test environment. So it started off at the Gray Box, and then we went to the Hunger Dome, and then Siege Perilous. And that's just one environment. So we really haven't done much to that, and we knew that, and it's been very tough for me because I'm like, I want to go in, I want to make this so much better. But we had to go off on our own behind the scenes and start creating the pipeline to create these environments. So that was a good question. Okay, so this is a like a new road texture, and there's some really neat stuff I can do with this. 1 second. Let me load it in. There we go. It's loaded in. Sometimes it takes a little sec to load in. So we can do really neat stuff like this to tile it up. And let me show you. So let's say, for example, I wanted to come in. We wanted more bricks. We wanted more stones in here. Well, traditionally, I'd have to go in and paint all that. Well, with a program like Substance, it allows me to come in here and quickly change the look and feel of these stones by just adding in. There we go. Plug this in. And then this will all update. There you go. So now I have a texture that has a lot more stones. And this is just a real quick down and dirty view of how we're doing this. There we go. Enlarge it. And this applies to all the type of terrain textures I'm working on. So grass, mud, dirt. I can take variances of those textures and very quickly add all types of new stuff to it without having to redo the whole thing and repaint it. So, all right, so let's move on to. Oops, that's not. Well, here's some new stuff, some new trees, some verticality trees we're working on. Taller ones, but I'm actually now going to go in and I'm going to build a parcel for you guys. We're just going to do it live, so bear with me here.
So that's a good segue into our next question. How much of the parcel is handcrafted versus procedural?
That's actually what I was about to get into. So the question was, how much of the parcel is procedural to me handcrafting? And that's actually was the whole key to the whole thing for us, environment-wise, was when Todd came to me and we were talking about how are we going to do these environments, we knew we needed these large scaling environments. So it couldn't be the traditional way, which is the static environments that you're used to playing. So we came up with the idea of, well, if I look at it like a slider scale. So if you can get me to 80% done procedurally, I'll handcraft the rest 15%, and then we save a 5%, or 75%, and then 10% would be for me handcrafting, and then another 5% for like polishing stuff. I think my math worked out on that one. I'm just an environment guy. I'm not a programmer. So anyways, so we looked at some procedurally based programs, and they all had the same kind of problem, which was it was very generic. How do you just, it just creates these generic worlds infinitely. So we started to use this program called Gaia. And Gaia affords me the ability to create an environment in such a way. I realize I'm talking and not doing stuff at the same time. It's going to be very hard for me. But Gaia allows me to actually come in here, create these worlds, and then get it to where I need it, and then still be able to handcraft them. Gaia was created by a guy named Adam Goodrich. He's our friend from down under. He's down from Australia, and he's been very helpful, very helpful. So thanks, Adam. So here I am. I'm going to start it off right now. And I always start with just a blank slate, which is just a terrain. And I've already got all my assets loaded into a file, so I can just start generating stuff. So I don't need to go through all that. That actually takes a while anyway. So I've actually kind of got some stuff already loaded in here. So the first thing I do is we come into our proprietary parcel building tool. And what this does is covers my screen, which is not what I'm supposed to do. Oh, God. I'm used to working on like 3 monitors, so this is kind of... All right, so what we need to do is tell it to basically use this terrain. So we're going to create the parcel, use that terrain. And then what this does, this gives me an outline of the shapes that I want to create. So for example, let's create a little S shape. So something like that. Let's just do like a nice little bend, dog leg, so to say. This is giving me, let me just turn this off because I'll keep clicking everywhere. There we go. So this gives me how the shape I want it to look like, because I'm not actually cutting these things up. what I'm doing is I'm creating the environment, and then we send it off, and it automatically stitches out the shape of the parcel itself. And so this is the first thing I kind of do, and then we'll close that down.
So, O'Neal, they want to know how big is the parcel that you're working in right now?
So this represents a huge scale. The actual parcels themselves, they are 256 by 256 meters. I'm sorry, the cells are. They can't hear you, could they?
No.
All right. So the question was, how big are the parcels? Well, the parcels are actually made up of individual cells, and the cells are 256 by 256 meters. So, for example, this parcel right here was, and let me just bring this back up again. Again, I apologize. There we go. I'm going to actually have to kind of keep this off down here. So we'll just keep that over here off to the side. So this one right here is the size, let's see here. This, there we go. So this is a pretty big one. This would be considered like a, I guess a 2x3 representing in space. It's hard to say the exact size, but this is a fairly medium size, I'd say. Not a super large one, a medium size. I mean, it's technically 5 cells, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, ma'am.
4 minutes.
Oh, 4 minutes? Oh, geez, all right, we'll do this quick. Wow, yeah, you have all this stuff planned out, and then it just happens really quick. So, all right, so I'm just going to start stamping out. I'm probably going to shut up a little bit so I can concentrate, and we're just going to start creating some stuff real quick, and then jump down in there and run around it in first person. I hope I don't sound as crazy as Todd right now. All right, so this allows me to scale and create mountains and hills, and so I like to get something going. I'm like Bob Ross at this point. I like to create a little happy hill. Just put that guy down there, and we'll stamp him in. And then I can come in and I can rotate him, scale it up, stamp him again. And since I am running out of time here, I'm going to quickly just do this. How am I doing, Todd?
You've got an extra couple minutes if you want to take them. Steve said, take all the time you need. So that means that equates to an extra 2 minutes for you.
All right, so I'm going to do this quick. So basically, we just got some just terrain height, and it's going to look really weird right now because I haven't had any textures in. And then this is kind of where the magic comes in, is now I start to spawn in, so to say, these textures based off the parameters I've already preset. So that's what we're going to do right now. And it's loading. It'll take a second. You can kind of see it down here. By the way, hi, Mom. She begged me to do that. All right, so now all these textures, the new textures that I've been working on, they're all kind of generated in there. And they're generated in such a way so that I've wanted to craft, that was the point of using Gaia, was I was able to go in there with the settings and get that kind of hand-painted, handcrafted look on a character level, so that when we run around them, it looks more like a world that I would have created. So let's go ahead and add some detail. So we're going to spawn in some grass, and then we'll throw in some trees and some rocks, and then we'll just run around it real quick. And then with Steve, what we're going to do with Steve is he's going to show you the process of stitching this all together, all these parcels, and then at the very end, we're going to actually run through, and we purposely did this. We only made 3 parcels for this example, and we wanted to show you the variety of what it looks like to run around with just 3 parcels. So here's kind of my grass and stuff that's kind of growing through. And let's come over here real quick. And this is a good example. So this is growing where I don't want it to grow. So this is a perfect example of how I can come in here, change the parameters of these textures. Reset all that detail I just did. And it's going to clear this out, basically. And now I'm going to respawn it. And that kind of dry grass should only grow on the dry texture where I've told it to. That was a good example of how fast we needed this to be so that we could quickly make changes. my time.
Got another question for you.
Sure.
How do you make the parcels fit together and to appear seamless?
Very good question. That's something Steve will follow into the next segment. It's a how are we going to make the environments stitch together, and that's actually something Steve's going to go over. So here it just fixed the situation that I was talking about. I'm going to go ahead and just spawn some quick trees, and we're going to run around it, and then I think we'll segment it out of this. So here it created a bunch of trees. And then now we're actually just going to hop down in here and see kind of how it is. So this is the environment I just created. So we got 2 minutes. So I'll just kind of run around real quick. We'll just see some of the areas. So here I wanted to check, see, all right, these rocks are spawning in nicely. That's good. We've got some good grass growing on some hills. That's good. And again, with the verticality of the trees. So this is looking like a nice little tiny environment. And this is essentially the process moving forward that we're going to do to create these dozens and dozens of parcels. And it really works quite well. And this is the first biome. So this is kind of like, think northern lands, grassy grasslands with some rock outcroppings. That's going to be kind of our first biome, but we'll branch out to other areas, deserts and stuff like that possibly, and swamplands and some really cool areas. But essentially this is just kind of where we're at right now. And it's been challenging, but I think we're starting to get there, and it's starting to look, it's coming along. I'm getting very happy with the look of this. So any more questions before I jet out of here?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, excellent.
Well, there is a comment. They want to see you do an extended version of this, like a video for one of the web updates.
Oh yeah. You know what? We'll do that. That's so. The question was, someone wanted to see an extended view of this. We'll absolutely, because I'm skipping over a lot of stuff, and I'll go into more detail. We'll do a web update, and me and Johnny will make a video of that. So yeah, that's a good question. And all right, we'll get Steve in here, and then he'll go through his process, and then we'll run around with a character.
Quite better. So if you can see, I guess you can see my screen right now. So what you're looking at here is a placeholder sort of campaign kingdom builder tool. If you've been following a lot of our media over the past year, you've seen mock-ups from the actual EK tool, and ultimately our internal kingdom builder tool will be that tool. It's just not up yet. So for the time being, we just needed something, so we threw this together. So if I wanted to build a world, which I've already started doing here, basically I'm going to take those parcels that John built and throw them all together. So this one here is a forest parcel, very much like what he built. And so I can just keep plopping these things down. So we're going to take the parcels that John built, we're going to throw them together, and at this point we're just talking, big pieces metadata. So this is an entire keep, the whole parcel, and I can piece those together. I can rotate them and fit them in, fill in the gaps. And this is basically what you do at the parcel level when you're building your EK. Once you've got all of that together, we save that out, and then that's it. Everything else we have to do at runtime. So, when you saw John putting together his parcel, he's throwing down hills and mountains, and the easiest thing would be if we just said, yeah, everything comes back to 0 at the very edge. And the problem with that is it looks like everything comes back down to 0. So instead what we're doing is we're stitching them together as best we can. And I know, John, you're the artist. You tell me, but I think it looks pretty good. So let's jump over into game. So here we are in the stitched together world. This is basically the kingdom, campaign, continent. Those are also the same thing to me. This is the one that I was putting together, but the version of it before the stream started, because I'm not going to do that on the fly. So right now he's running around on a keep parcel. And
a rank 2, by the way.
Rank 2, yeah. So we've pre-placed this castle, but in the campaign, some of them will have pre-placed buildings. But in your EK, a lot of that is going to be up to the player to place the sections of wall that they have and that they want where they want them. That's why a lot of these areas are are somewhat flat is so that there's a lot more flexibility for where you can build without everything sort of crashing through the ground.
And this is a stitch right here.
Yeah, so this here, that keep parcel is about 5-10 meters up from the grasslands next to it. And so this is all being stitched together. And you may have seen that little hole there. We're just now getting all of this tech together. So there's definitely some kinks to work out. And stitching along the edges, it looks a little man-made with that straight berm. But I think as a starting point, it looks pretty good. So yeah, if you just sort of head northeast, you're going to go through some grasslands, and then eventually there'll be a forest out there. So like John was saying earlier, we only built 3 parcels for this particular demo. There's the keep that we started on, and we're sort of crossing back over the corner of it here. We're walking into a grasslands, and this grasslands is just a single cell. This is the very smallest unit of terrain that we can build, and we're going to sort of make a whole bunch of these with different flavors, just as sort of filler. The big sort of showpieces will be larger parcels. It'll give us more room to build big mountains or lakes or any sort of that stuff. And in between, we're going to fill it in with some of these other sort of more ambient things.
So here's the forest.
Yeah, so you're coming up on a forest here now, and if you look closely, you can tell at the moment where that edge is. Yeah, right here. He's about to cross it. There you go. He's standing directly on the seam right there. So people earlier were asking about stitching and how we're going to glue all these things together. The big secret is we take them close enough that we can, at runtime, procedurally join those terrains and not have it look too extreme. If one parcel is 100 meters taller than the next one, there's going to be a weird cliff there, and that probably won't look too good. But we've found that anything within about, 10 meters or so,
yeah, about 10 meters,
that those have actually seemed to stitch really well. And the great part about it is, John can use his 80% procedural, 10% hand-built, and 10% whatever else it was. The math didn't add up last time either. And so he can pump out a whole lot of these terrains, and then we can glue them together and make a totally different world for every campaign. And, the important parts about where the castles, where the resources, all the gameplay things that matter will be different. The world and the ground underneath you will still look pretty good. It's not going to be, as though an artist spent hours on every single square meter. Yeah, I think this is... This is the corner of the keep here, yeah.
Yeah.
You're in good shape. It won't be quite as handcrafted as if John spent 2 years doing it, but I think given the gameplay goals, this is going to serve us really, really well. And it also lets us do things like the EK, where we have no way of knowing what a player is going to do. And we certainly don't want totally procedural worlds. That looks generally not that great.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Any questions?
Are there any questions in the channel yet, Val? I picked a couple out from earlier. If there's nothing there.
Okay.
All right. So there was a question about optimization and will this affect optimization? And the answer is yes, very much so. I think you want to go east. There it is. So there's a lot.
So real quick, this is a whole nother castle parcel that's just ran up on, and that's the beauty of this system is this. We'll just randomly generate these parcels, and so you'll come across keeps and castles and point of interests, POIs and stuff, and yeah, that's the beauty of this system. Sorry.
And obviously we're going to make more than 3 for the the end game. There's
going to be dozens and dozens and dozens.
This is sort of a demo amount of content, but as all these systems come online, then John can go ahead and start making all of the final set of parcels to fill out the world. And we're thinking on the order of tens to low hundred of different types of terrain. And so if you can sort of imagine how big and diverse the world feels with just 3 of them, I think the world's gonna not feel very repetitive, which is great. So the question about optimization is a good one. There's a lot of things that you can do if you know ahead of time what the world is going to look like. Lighting, for one thing. Lighting in real time is really expensive. And if you have no idea what the world looks like before you run it, you really can't do that. You can't do any sort of pre-baked lighting. So, the sunbeams look nice and all, and they're coming. Basically, we get them because we have to do dynamic lighting no matter what. But there's a cost to that. And so we have to do a lot of things to try and, win back some of the performance. Another sort of classic one is occlusion culling. So if you know the lay of the land, you can calculate ahead of time what you can see from where. And if you've ever noticed, particularly Unreal Engine games, every time you go into a building, there's some sort of weird, curvy, S-shaped hallway. And what they're doing there is they're intentionally making it so there's no way you can see from the inside to the outside. And it lets them drop out a whole bunch of stuff that the client, they know ahead of time the client can't see. Well, we can't do that. We don't know where the wall is ahead of time. So we're going to have to do all of those things on the fly. And as John is running around here, you can't tell because it's happening well beyond the edge of the fog. But it's his client doesn't even know what is out there. The very furthest piece of information his client has is about 1,000 meters out. And that fog is more like 600. Is that right?
Yeah, about 600 out. 600 meters.
600 meters out. And, in the Hunger Dome, the closest you can see a player is more around 100 meters. So we're sort of tiering out the information so that the client only needs to know what's nearby and can focus on that. And, outside of the fog, the trees don't exist, nor do the rocks. So we're already starting to put in some of those sorts of optimizations that we would otherwise have been able to do at design time. And that would have saved a lot of our time and sort of been a shortcut. Some of these things do exist on the asset store, but the built-in Unity functionality is mostly when you build a scene. The pathfinding is another challenge. The Unity pathfinding, again, expects you to be able to know ahead of time what it's going to be like. And so we're having to figure out a dynamic pathfinding solution that can deal with all of the stitching and players placing walls. And, it really is sort of the worst case scenario for a lot of those things.
I have a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Will the grass and foliage interact with the player eventually? Like right now, you kind of run through them.
Right. So the question is, does any of the sort of visuals of the grass and the terrain, does mud change your move speed or anything like that? And we would like to. It does complicate things quite a bit. But ideally, yes, it would. And it may not be that every blade of grass causes you to slow down when you hit it, but we may do sort of larger things. Like if you're wading through a mud area, that might slow you down. Or, if we get around to having some sort of, treacherous volcano biome later, then maybe lava areas hurt you. We have to be a little bit careful because some of this is a little bit procedural. So we don't want to end up with that Gaia tool just creating a ring of death around a spawn point.
Okay, so another question for you. Will we, as players, be able to set things like trees and plants into our parcels, or will they be part of the predefined parcel?
I'd say a bit of both.
Yeah, combination of both.
So there's all of the building, walls and houses and mills, and there's all sort of things that are obviously buildings. So you'll definitely be placing those. And then there will be some things that probably are not intuitively buildings, but will act like buildings. So, flag poles, rocks, sort of decorative rocks like that. And you'll definitely be able to place some of those. And, but for the most part, these forests will probably come pre-populated with trees. You're not going to have to go in and say, I want a tree here, I want a tree here, I want a flower here. Most of that's going to be built ahead of time. And if you want one that is, an L block shape with a forest versus one that's not with a forest, those will be two different parcels. And they will have been built to look good the way that they are. You have another question, or I got one from earlier?
No, go ahead.
So there's a question about roads, and how are we going to stitch things against the edges? If you have one road and you want it to go from across parcels, and right now we're not trying to solve that problem. We're trying to make sure that every parcel is totally compatible with every other parcel within a biome type, and ideally even across biomes. And roads make that really, really hard. If you want to be able to have a road that crosses from one to the other seamlessly, then it has to obviously line up and there has to be a road on both parts. And so for now, we are focusing on making sure that it's as flexible as possible and we're willing to sacrifice roads. Now, we totally do want to come back to that if we have time and allow roads, ideally let players put down roads and have them span from one end of the kingdom all the way to the other. But right now, it's not the highest priority, and so it's a matter of time.
Can you chop down trees?
Yes.
Not today, but ultimately, yes. Oh, right. Can you chop down the trees? For harvesting. Right. So these trees will become the harvesting nodes. They're not hooked up right now. We don't have harvesting at all yet. But the plan is that these trees will themselves be the harvesting nodes. John, were there any other things you want me to hit on while we're...
No, I mean, I think, like I said, this was just 3 parcels that I created, and one was a 1x. So you imagine it was 1 cell, and then it was 3 cells, and then I did a larger one with 8 cells for the keep. And the amount of just procedure, I mean, we just dropped it in, and the variety you can get just by rotating a parcel, it's pretty awesome. So as Steven said, we're going to have dozens upon dozens upon dozens of them that will change up the way the game looks from a world building standpoint, variety wise, and it's going to look really cool, I think.
I gave him last call for questions.
All right.
Last call for alcohol.
Will flowers and such be harvestable for alchemy crafting?
Not these flowers. So the question is, are the flowers harvestable for crafting? These flowers, sort of that John is running through right now, are decorative. There will be harvestable, herbs and things like that. But those will look more like your sort of traditional harvest node. Here's a sparkly herb. You go find it, pick it up, rather than every single square meter of the world being harvestable.
Yeah, this is another stitch. It worked quite well. This is an area that's stitched from one parcel to the other, and it looks, you can hardly tell.
Okay, here really is the last question. How long does it take to run from one side of a cell to the other?
What side of a cell?
Well, it depends on the size.
Yeah.
I guess maybe the world, if they like the 20 by 20.
Yeah. I think we did that math at one point. If there was nothing in your way, it doesn't take that long to get just the straight 5 kilometers from one edge to another. But you're not going to really see much of the world if you do that. And so if your goal is to run from one side of the campaign world to another, you can probably do that in a couple of hours. But if you actually wanted to go and search and find all of the best harvesting nodes, it's going to take an individual several hours to cover even a single continent, assuming that they're unopposed.
Yeah, it's not like the terrains are just going to be jet flat. I mean, you'll have objects and mountains and stuff in your way that you'll have to traverse the terrain. I mean, that's another thing, is traversing the terrain itself. And spawns, with mobs and other characters. Like me. I'm going to be running around trying to kill you guys. So I'm not going to do all the other stuff I did before. We're showing out the textures and the props and all that. I'm just going to go straight into creating a terrain parcel in like the process that we got going. So I've already kind of got this semi set up, and this is my terrain. And I'm using it effectively makes, it's a 4x4 is what I'm using. That's for our good medium to small size parcels. I have one that's a 2048 that is designed for our giant parcels. I'm going to make a medium to large parcel. So let's do something like this. Let's go ahead and turn it on. And we'll go ahead so I can end up maybe making a lake, and we'll do kind of just an interesting shape is what I was thinking. Maybe, well, maybe something like that. And what's cool about something like this is another one can be slotted in, like right here. Not just right here and right here. This actually, maybe you have an L shape that would slot right into here, and then they would stitch together like we showed earlier. But so this is going to be the shape that I'm going to use to define kind of where I'm going to be spending most of my time sculpting the terrain. And I'm just, like I said, I'm going to dive into it. And let's just go over here. I always like to start off with just a little bit of, I would say, kind of, sorry, let me get this open. Like just a small hill that I spread out just to get a little bit of noise. Because that's one thing that we're not doing. We're not going to have like these crazy, crazy high cliffs that you're going to be able to jump off of all over the place. We'll have those, but not everywhere. We want this to be able to have the space for you to build as well as fight on. So it's kind of a challenge sometimes to figure out how much of the terrain we actually, do something like that, where we make these massive mountains. I'm going to go ahead and turn this off for a second so you can see that. So that's not very playable. We want to avoid a lot of this. This is much more playable with spots of something like this that's much maybe smaller and locational. That's okay. And we will have mountain ranges. So this is something separate. All right, let me fit this back to terrain. Get this back going. Get a little bit of noise. Spread that out, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp it. Turn that back on. So that's giving me just, again, a little bit of noise, a little bit of height variation, not too much. When it comes to the stitching, we're trying to stay within the 5 to 10, possibly 15 meter range, so that when something goes like this to this, we don't want it to be too high. We want it to be able to kind of stitch, so at worst you get a nice little slope. All right, so let's see. Let me pull in some other stuff here. I do want to make a little lake possibly. Put this down right here. It's rotating. So I'm gonna make a little lake right in the center of all this. So I'm gonna build up this land a little bit, and then I'm gonna lower it back down. And let's get mountain.
His screen is frozen. What are you talking about? His screen is not. That's not what he's saying on his screen. It's frozen. Yeah.
Oh, it is.
What kind of chicken burrito do you want? There's barbecue, there's Cajun, there's chicken spinach.
Working on that, yeah. We have to reset this, John.
All right, I'll just keep working. Just let me know. Let me know when we're back.
Let him know we're resetting the screen.
Oh, can they still hear me?
I think so.
Oh, we're resetting the screens, having some technical difficulties here. Apologize for that.
Here we go.
All right, looks like we're back. We can check with.
Yep.
All right, cool. All right, so I'm just still plugging away here, getting some shape in the center. I want a ridge right here, so I'm going to make a ridge. Maybe something like that. And I'm just randomly pulling some shapes that I've kind of used before. And we have a bunch of shapes that we've already made. Height maps is what these are actually for the technical term. And yeah, this is kind of a good one to like, basically. All right, so I won't get too crazy with this. I just kind of wanted to quickly get this going. So it looks like I'm close to where I could actually put some water just by stamping this stuff around. And so let's go ahead and actually grab my water. Yeah, so I can already see that I'm not quite there, but I'm close. So probably something like that. So the power with this tool is I'm able to do stamping in a variety of ways. I can actually raise the terrain and I can lower the terrain. So now I want to come in here and I actually want to push this terrain back down. And we're going to try to do this like this. I'm going to grab a mountain. Spell that right. Let's grab, maybe this one should work. All right, so right now I've actually got this pushing up. So if I were to stamp this right now, it would pull all that up. We're going to reverse that. We're actually going to lower height, and I'm actually going to invert the stamp. So now basically anywhere I push this down, it's going to create kind of like a, well, it's going to create a lake for me. So let's try that. There we go. And so now I should start seeing how I want to do my water. There we go. Getting some interesting shapes out of that as well, which is another cool thing. I can also actually come in here, and this was another really good reason why I wanted to use Gaia as a program. Once again, program I'm using in conjunction with Unity is called Gaia. Adam Goodwrench, he helped us out. He really went above and beyond. I mentioned him earlier, and so he's been a really good help. But one of the reasons why I liked it so much was I can come here at any point in time and use Unity's default built-in tools. So if I wanted to hand sculpt myself, I can do that, and it won't really mess with the other stuff that I've already done. So I kind of like where I've gotten this. Getting some interesting shapes, got some height variances. I will apply a nice little bit of a smooth across the terrain.
So John, here's a question for you.
Sure.
So we've announced that there won't be swimming, like you won't actually get into the water.
That's actually not true. We have talked about swimming. The question is about swimming. Is that about swimming?
No.
Oh, sorry. There's a good chance we will have swimming.
That's so new. I didn't even know that.
Yes, and swimming is instead of actually going under the water, we would just keep the players above the water, and they would just be animated on top of the water. That's something that we've just talked about in the last couple of weeks, and it's something that would solve our water issues for right now. Eventually, we could maybe possibly go back where you can actually go under the water, but this would be a good solution to get around water, because water is not an easy thing.
Well, the question is, would they be able to have bridges, to build bridges?
Yes. Well, we would have bridges would probably most likely be in the sets, so that you would be snapping from one to the other. But that's definitely on the board as well. So, all right. So now let's pop some textures on here. We're kind of getting some things that we like. So let's make sure I have my instances going. Reset that. And I should get some rocks based off my height and slope that I've already predetermined. I've already spent the time putting all these textures in here and then working the blends and stuff. So it should spawn this way every time I make a terrain. It should be the same way every time based off my slopes, meaning if I have a slope that's going like this, a certain texture that I've defined will always grow that way every time. So yeah, there we go. We've got this loaded, so to say, kind of like that. And like I say, our first biome, we're shooting more for a northern look, kind of a Scotland type thing, Game of Thronesy. You hear Game of Thrones thrown around a lot. By the way, that last episode, pretty awesome. My favorite part was, all right, so let's put in some detail now. And then we're going to jump down there and run around. And then I'm actually going to paint a road so I can show you what's really cool about how in one area there will be grass details and whatnot. And then when I paint the road and redo it, it will know that that texture has now taken that space and it won't grow any of the detail around that, which is really neat. Come on. All right, so if I zoom down there, yeah, whoa, you should start seeing some cool stuff going on. All right, so now let's go ahead and let's spawn some rocks. I didn't do that last time. And I have these rocks spawning only on the rock texture so that we can get more of this kind of rocky look. And then I would have a separate spawner to just spawn some rocks just kind of out in the open. You might come across some stuff. All right. So did I? Oh, I didn't spawn it. Did I spawn it? There we go. So that's going to take a second, loading all those fabulous rocks. And we can actually do this very similar to what we call point of interests. You'll hear this term POIs. And what that is think of like quarry mines and rock mines and just basic type of maybe ruins, elven ruins that you run up on. We can load this up in a spawner and then just spawn it everywhere randomly based off parameters that we preset. Oh boy, that is taking a while. You know what? I may have to let me cancel that out and just see what we got there already. So I have these rocks loading pretty quick. So yeah, these rocks are now generating, and this is actually the same rock, and I wanted to show off this in this way. We're gonna have a bunch of different models, but this rock is flipped, turned, scaled down in such a way, and the way Gaia handles it is really interesting because it looks like different models. Just if you were to look and scan the horizon there, it doesn't look like the same shape. And that's because it's twisting it, turning it, shrinking it, and doing all this kind of craziness. I also just realized that this texture right here should be at a 0.9. We're going to darken that up. There we go. All right, so let's go ahead. And you know what? I'm not going to spawn trees this time. I'm just going to have, let's say this is literally like a Scotland type land. So here, let's just jump down. And I fell through the world. So let me move my player spawner. So yeah, he's right below the world, and we kind of want to see him over here anyway. So there we go. Boom. So this is, like I say, our first biome is going to be very green. And as we go forward, we'll be adding new biomes into all different areas. So here's our water. I've got the fog cranked up on this one a little too high. I'm using an older setting. Let's see. All right, so now let's try painting a road and seeing what that looks like. Gonna find a flat area. So let's just say, for the sake of argument,
so O'Neal, here's another question for you. How difficult is it to change a terrain from one season to another?
The question was, how hard is it to change? And I heard earlier, you guys can hear her, but sometimes you can't. So I'm just gonna repeat the question anyways. Question was, how hard is it to change terrains or seasons in the terrains? Well, we've talked about ideas of how we're going to do that. And the beauty of this program is once I've loaded in the settings, it's not that hard. It's just a matter of loading up the settings and then respawning it. I don't have that set up. So I'm painting just a quick. So right now this is all covered up, and we don't want that. For the sake of this, we just kind of wanted this to not grow on this. So I can come back to my grass spawner, reset that, clear out the detail, and it will spawn around it now. Takes a sec. Boom. There we go. So now that texture that I've just painted is spawned right through that. So I'm going to go ahead and just turn that off, the spawner. And we're just going to fly this this dude right over here so we can run through it and see it. And then there's my road. And what's cool is I have the textures blending in such a way so there's a little bit of fall off, so it's not just a harsh. So it will slowly blend a little bit into some of the other textures to get more of a natural look. It's the yellow brick road. And that's about it. That was just we just showing off just a kind of another way to do this. And like I say, we're going to be doing water and lakes and creeks and rivers and all kinds of cool stuff.